Do you miss the classic video games like Pac-Man or Donkey Kong? Or maybe an old console such as the Super Nintendo or NES? If that's the case, you need to watch this video. I'm going to show you how to run RetroPie at home, and you can run all of these classic video games and relive all the fun that you enjoy. Let's get started. Hello guys, welcome back to Tech Talk. Today we're going to be talking about RetroPie. What is RetroPie? Basically, it's a complete solution that will allow you to run all types of arcade games as well as console games on a Raspberry Pi. It supports multiple flavors of the Raspberry Pis, so you just pick the download that you want. In this video, we're going to install and configure the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus from beginning to end. We'll download the image for RetroPie. We will then burn it to a microSD card, and then we will go in and hook everything up, run RetroPie, and configure it, and maybe even play a game or two so you can see what it looks like. So anyway, let's get started. Let's get started with setting up the Raspberry Pi. First off, let's describe the things that you're going to need. First, you're going to need a Raspberry Pi 3. This is a Model B+, which is the latest version. Let's go ahead and open it up, take a look. Okay, so here we have it. Let me identify a few ports here. First off, this is your HDMI. This is going to connect up to your TV or other monitor that you might be using. This is a, I believe it's a micro USB. This is going to supply power to your Raspberry Pi. Then on the back side, we have the microSD slot. Over here we have Ethernet. It also has built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So in this video we're going to set up not the Ethernet, but we're going to set up Wi-Fi on our network. And then over here we have 4 USB 2.0 ports. These are the GPIO header pins. We're not going to use those in this video, but you could if you wanted to. Then over here, this connector is used, I believe, to hook up to an external video source. And this one is for the camera, if you wanted to hook a camera up to it. And this is the audio jack, so you can use this to connect up to a set of external speakers. So yeah, that's the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. Next, you will need a micro SD card, such as this. This one is actually a 64 gig. We are going to install RetroPie to this micro SD card. To do that, first we're going to install it into this sleeve, like so. Now we can plug this into our computer and burn the image of the RetroPie image to the micro SD card. And then of course, once it's done, we'll take it out and install it into the Raspberry Pi, like so. Another thing you're going to need is a power supply for your Raspberry Pi. In this case, we are using a 2.5 amp 5 volt micro USB cable. That's what it looks like. You'll want to take this and plug it in here into the side connector. That'll supply power to your Raspberry Pi. Next, you're going to need an HDMI cable. And what you'll do is you'll plug one into the Raspberry Pi and then the other one into your TV or monitor. So that'll go right here, like so. And of course, it wouldn't be any fun playing games without a controller. So here I've picked up a rather inexpensive controller off of Amazon. I believe it was like $10 or $15. It was fairly cheap. Main thing that I wanted here is the controls here, the various buttons, and a start and select, and then there's 2 trigger buttons up here. I'll provide links to this particular controller if you're interested. You don't have to use a wired controller. If you wanted to use a Bluetooth controller, such as an old Xbox 360 controller or something along those lines, you could use Bluetooth with it. But in this video, we're going to keep it simple and just use a USB controller. For the initial setup, you are going to need a keyboard. So you'll want to, if you don't have one already, you'll want a USB keyboard. This is the one we're going to use for the setup and configuration. It's one I've had for quite a while. Okay, so in terms of setting this up, here we have the Raspberry Pi. We're just simply going to connect our game controller once we burn the image and plug it in like so. And we're going to take the keyboard and plug it in. It's only used for the initial setup and configuration. And then, of course, we plug this into the wall. And now we have all the hardware in place, with the exception of the display. I'm not showing the display right now. You can buy a kit that allows you to connect this up to a little control board that will allow you to connect up joysticks and buttons and all kinds of stuff. I'll provide a link in the description below where you can purchase that if you're interested. It'll give you a cool arcade look and feel if you want to install this in, let's say, a arcade cabinet or a custom build that you're interested in doing. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is go to the RetroPie website and download RetroPie. So what we're going to do is launch our browser here and go to retropie.org.uk/download. Press enter. Now we're on the RetroPie site, and there's some pre-made images for the Raspberry Pi. In this case, it was released April 14, 2018. There may be a newer version by the time you see this video. If so, don't worry about it, same procedure. Okay, so we scroll down. We're going to install this on a Raspberry Pi 3B+. So we're going to pick the image for a Raspberry Pi 2 and 3. So click, and the download will begin. And once you download the file, you're going to want to extract it. And once it's extracted, then we're going to move on to the next step and actually burn that image directly to a microSD card. Let's go to another page here. Go to etcher.io, press enter. And what you'll want to do is select here the particular download that you want. In my case, this is correct. Download for Windows x64. There's also downloads for Mac, Linux, you name it. So once you pick the download that you want, just simply click here and it will download Etcher, and we'll use this shortly to go ahead and install the RetroPie image to the microSD. Okay, so now that Etcher has been downloaded, you simply follow the prompts, install the application, and when you run it, this is what you'll see. So we're going to zoom in a little bit here, and we're going to select the image. So we click here, and this is the location for the image file. So we're going to go ahead and select that. And we'll move on down to where it says Open. Click Open. And here we have the 2.42 gigabyte image of RetroPie and the microSD card. Make sure that this is correct. If you have any USB drives that are plugged into your computer or laptop, you might want to remove them before you do this, or at least just double check that that's the correct drive letter. Okay, once that's done, click Flash, and it'll burn that image directly to the microSD card. And then once this completes, we'll install it into the Raspberry Pi. Now that we have our RetroPie image burned to the microSD, we're going to go ahead and take the microSD card and plug it directly into the Raspberry Pi. And from here, we're going to go ahead and plug in some of these other things that we're going to need, such as our power. So we'll go ahead and install the power. There we go. There's the power. It's not plugged in right now. And next, we'll take the HDMI out to our TV, plug that in. And next, we're going to plug in the keyboard, because we're going to need this for the initial configuration. So we'll plug in the keyboard into our USB, and of course we're going to need the controller, but we'll go ahead and plug in the controller in just a little bit once we turn this thing on. Okay, so now we're going to apply power to it and go ahead and boot up RetroPie. Okay, now we're starting the Raspberry Pi with RetroPie. Okay, so we'll configure input. We'll hold down the button. We'll press up, down, left, right, start, select the A button, B, X, Y. Now it's asking for the left shoulder, so we'll press this one, the right shoulder for this one. Left trigger we don't have, so we're going to hold down A. Right trigger, same thing. Left thumb we don't have. If we had an Xbox controller or something else, then that would work. So I'm just going to hold down the button through some of the rest of these. Okay, and that one is the hotkey enable. So for here, we're going to press the select as our hotkey. And now we're going to press A. Okay, now that we have our buttons configured, let's go press A on the RetroPie. And the first thing we're going to do is set up our Wi-Fi. So we'll scroll down to the bottom, select Wi-Fi. And when this appears, it's saying to set your country via menu 4 for localization options. So we'll say yes, we want RaSP config to be launched for us. We'll go to localization options. We'll change our time zone to US. Say OK. And we'll say Central, which is my time zone. All right. Then we'll say Finish. Now it's asking to connect to the Wi-Fi network, so we'll say OK. And now it should show us all the different SSIDs. Mine happens to be Lucas, so I'll now enter the password for my Wi-Fi. Press enter. And it should give us an IP address here very shortly. And it did. So now we're connected, and we can exit. Now, RetroPie is configured to our network. So what does this mean? Well, it means now we could actually go ahead and install some ROMs. One thing I would like to do is go into RaSP config here, press A. And I want to change my host name, network options, host name. And I'm going to change it to RetroPie 1. You might want to leave yours as is, but I have a few other RetroPies connected to my network. So I'm going to make it RetroPie 1. Say OK. Finish. And it's asking to reboot. So we'll go ahead and say yes to reboot. Okay, one thing you may have noticed, there were no games. And the reason why there were no games is there's no games that come with RetroPie. So you will need to download some ROMs from whatever sources that you find. Google is your friend. So if you would, download the ROMs that you're looking for. What we're going to do now is I've got a couple of ROMs here. I've got Galaga, Galaxian, and Miss Pac-Man right here. Galaga, Galaxian, and Miss Pac-Man. And we're going to copy those over to our RetroPie. So our // RetroPie1. Press enter. Okay, now it's asking for a username. The login is Raspberry and password is Pi. So we are now on the RetroPie, and we see we have BIOS, configs, ROMs, splash screens. We want to go to ROMs, and these are all the emulators that are already pre-installed for you in RetroPie. So what we'll do is we'll select MAME for all, and we'll copy these 3 ROMs. Into our ROMs MAME for all folder. So right click, paste, and now we have our ROMs installed. Next, we'll restart Emulation Station, and these games should appear. Okay, so now let's restart Emulation Station. We'll hit the Start button, scroll down to Quit, press A. We'll press A on Restart Emulation Station. Yes. And now, as you'll see, we have a MAME group, so we can press A. And now we see Miss Pac-Man, Galaxian, and Galaga. So let's select Miss Pac-Man. Okay, when you first start, none of the buttons are operable on the controller. So what we'll have to do is press Tab, and we'll configure this with the keyboard. Okay, now we need to be able to exit the game from within the controller. So we're going to go down to UI Cancel. Here we're going to go ahead and press Enter, and we're going to press Start and Select on the controller at the same time. And we're going to hit Enter one more time and hit the Escape key. So that way we could use either the Escape key on the keyboard or Start and Select at the same time on the controller to exit the game. Okay, so now we are going to go down to Coin, press Enter, and then we're going to press the Select button on the controller. And we're going to go up here to One Player Start. We're going to press Enter there, and we're going to press Start on the keypad. Okay, so now we're going to program the controls for the game. So we're going to press Enter on P1 up, and then press the up button on the controller. Do the same thing for the rest of them. Down, left, right, and then button 1, this is up to you how you want to arrange it. I'm going to make A my button 1, B my button 2, button 1, press Enter, B for button 2, button 3 I'll make X, button 4 I'll make Y. Okay, so now we can press Start and Select, and it'll back up and return back to the game. So now we should be able to put a quarter in by hitting Select, and there we go. Now right now I don't have any sound being fed in through this, so you can't hear the sounds. But as you can see, I am able to control Miss Pac-Man. And on your TV, of course, you'll hear sounds. But I didn't want it to distract during the video. Now I'm going to hit Start and Select and Exit. And we'll try Galaxian. We'll put a quarter in and hit Start. And there you have it. Start and select again. We can exit out of there. We can go to Galaga. Put a quarter in, start the game. And you're playing the original Galaga in RetroPie. Pretty awesome, isn't it? Brings back a lot of memories. Keep in mind you can do this for all of the different consoles. You can install ROMs for Super Nintendo, Nintendo, any of the emulators that you saw in the list. I hope you enjoyed this video on RetroPie. Please click the subscribe button below. I plan on releasing some additional videos on RetroPie, RetroPie Arcades. My son and I restored an arcade cabinet that we found over by a dumpster. So click the link right here and you'll be able to watch that video as well. I also have a new video series that I plan on releasing pretty soon on 3D printing. So don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you.